I find it quite difficult to describe what I do, partly because I've changed so much over the years. And I think in defining yourself, you limit the possibilities. So it's something that I've found increasingly difficult. I don't want to deny what I have been, because it's made me who I am now. I was educated in ceramics, so which very clearly gives me a craft background. But it was such a particular time when I was educated. There wasn't so much emphasis on particularly ceramics being functional. There was a lot of influence from America. Also, something else that's been very important to me is growing up in the Midlands. Because my background was originally in crafts, and there's an seemingly endless discussion on the difference between art and craft. It's something that I do think about, but I just find it deeply frustrating. In some sense, it doesn't interest me. The thing that you have to be very careful of is that you're not held back by the way that you use language. And I think that that's one of the things that I find really frustrating with the art-craft debate. The balance has changed so that language has become, in some sense, more important than the artwork. I started to work with photography by accident. I did a lot of photography when I got the Bicentennial Fellowship in New York. And they were a fantastic way of digesting the city and learning about pattern in a way that I'd never understood pattern before. I've wrestled with pattern right from the beginning. And one of the frustrations I had was the way that you're taught pattern. And you're mainly taught about pattern through wallpaper or fabric. You're not taught about pattern in a more awkward way, is the only way I can say it. And I understood from looking at things like Japanese prints that there was a much more sophisticated way of putting patterns together. So you can see that over the years, I've built up this relationship to pattern that's a continuing conversation. It was very upsetting to come back to England. It was small, and I think people forget it was small and grey, and it wasn't an enthusiastic culture. So coming back and feeling constrained was very hard. I think I suffered a depression for about a year before I started to crawl out of it, and discovered colour. We always talk about the 70s as a time of liberation. Maybe it's why I think that pattern's liberating. Snappy Snaps would do you a bargain set of 2 prints for the price, practically the price of 1. So when I started to get these double packs of prints done at Snappy Snaps, and suddenly I could put 2 prints together, of the same print, obviously, and start making very complicated patterns. So I'd go back to Snappy Snaps and I'd say, can you print me 8 of those now? Now can you print me 16? And because it was Snappy Snaps, they'd come back in different colours. So, one time they'd have a blue bias, next time they'd have a green bias. So I got very excited about that as well. The wonderful thing about these patterns that I was working with was the level of detail in them. And people kept saying to me, oh, you could make it into wallpaper. Well, they were missing the point. The point was that there was an edge to this, so it had a frame. And the connections were things that your eyes did. And the thrill of it was this combination of your eye and your brain continuously reinventing what it was seeing. So it became like a dance where you came forward and you could see every little detail. And also the fact that it's not professional. It's just for people taking their holiday snaps there. So They could care less what you asked them to do. And, times when they did me a wonderful print with a fabulous colour, trying to persuade them to replicate it, it was a complete waste of time. I'm aware that if you put something in a public space, it belongs to the public, and they won't necessarily treat it with great respect. But in the back of my mind, I always think, my work's so complicated, it's not going to be their favourite canvas. And I've got a little piece of work outside this building where I live. And a car crashed into the wall a few years ago, and some of the tiles fell down. And nobody's ever graffitied the tiles, but that tiny square of white paint gets tagged regularly. I know that what I do is contemporary. I don't have any doubt about that, because it's impossible to do something that isn't. This is when I'm living. What tends to happen now is that when you're doing public art, the contract deals with the future. I do wrestle with the things of all these things to do with permanence. One of the things I learned when I stopped doing ceramics was the fantastic freedom that ceramics gave you, because you could make a god-awful mess and just break it up. The minute you're using another material that's difficult to destroy, you have a completely different mindset. I'd love to think that pattern wasn't a matter of fashion. I'd love to think that people understood that it's something that underpins every single day of our lives. Because we know, as individuals, if within our lives we rely on a pattern, I'm up 5 minutes late today, well, my day is ruined because I have to have this very formal, it's pattern. Everything, every choice you're making, the thing that I learnt from Pattern Crazy is London is built on pattern. Brick, stone, everything. There's pattern everywhere. Because pattern and colour make me so happy. I love to think that it makes some other people happy, and that other people will think, yes, that's all right, I can do that. I think the subject of getting bored with things and fashion is a really interesting one, because it'll happen. But I'm not sure what the time span is. There's something about something that's already been translated that you don't particularly want to scan it again. So the photographs and the negatives are just stored as photographs and negatives. I have this sort of fantasy about going back to see where I was born. I never get round to it. And so I don't tend to go back. It's one of the things that's been sort of both a sort of positive and not a negative, but a sort of difficulty for me with doing an archive has been going back, because in some sense you don't want things to be tidy, and in another way you don't want to revisit difficult times. And when you're just sort of looking back in a casual way, you skirt over the difficult times, so you move swiftly on.